as we start this memorable episode, I want everybody to stick around until the very end. I know you're largely here for Hank, and I get that. But I'm just going to tell you a little InGoal radio story, a little behind the curtain tale about InGoal Radio, the podcast. It's a presentation of the Hockey Shop, source for sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. Welcome in to the King Henrik episode that we've all been waiting for. Darren Millard, along with the co-founders of InGoal magazine, Kevin Woodley and David Hutchison, and we get a little fanny today. We go fanboys today with Henrik Lundqvist. Hutch, before we get into Woody, who had the conversation, it's a pretty cool discussion between two goalie geeks.
It's a fantastic discussion between two goalie geeks. As I was telling you before, I sort of felt like I was listening to a couple of minor hockey goalies talking about their gear. And I know there's a lot of NHL goaltenders who care about their gear, but just the way they talked and how excited they were, and you could just hear in his voice every time Kevin talked about the Lundqvist loop, he sort of nervously giggled, and you could tell he's super proud of it at the same time, that his name is going to be there forever. Like, it just felt like so many of the minor hockey goalies I've met, what they might be like once they get to the NHL, if they still have all these resources and all these ways of thinking about the cool things they can do with their gear. And we know Woody's the biggest fanboy in the world for Lundy too, as we look at his jersey on Woody's wall behind him too.
So I'm glad that came through, because I'm going to be honest with you. We weren't able to connect by Zoom, so he called in. So he couldn't see the fanboy stuff behind me, and I couldn't see his reaction when I started geeking out on the gear. So I was worried I'd gotten a little annoying on that. So I'm glad that you guys heard that in his voice, that he was happy to talk about, because here I am hammering. Like, we've got one of the greatest goaltenders of all time. I think he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, greatest Ranger of all time, like legend. And yes, I'm fanboying a little bit. And I'm asking him about the loop on the back of his skates and, changing his equipment. And he was awesome, but I was a little worried that I was pushing too hard on some of the weirder notes of his career.
Yeah, one of the things that I think draws you into these conversations with these goaltenders is Woody, quite honestly, you ask questions they've never been asked before because of the platform that you're on, an InGoal magazine, an InGoal radio, the podcast, that you're able to go in depth and go to areas that they've never traveled.
I think that's why InGoal has worked and the relationships have been built. And it goes back to my days starting with Goalie News, the short-lived magazine that Ian Clark's company used to run. And honestly, asking questions that, you're right, they weren't getting asked. Like, VH was just being invented and proper leg recovery wasn't common. And I was reading and learning about these things and asking about it. It's like, I was like every other journalist for the first 5 years of my career. Good goal, bad goal, that kind of stuff. Doing that job opened up this world and this language to me. And I think for a lot of them at the time, it's changed. There's more people asking those types of questions now, but at the time, nobody asked those questions. And so I was the only person in any locker room sort of speaking their language. And sometimes it opens them up. So yeah, hopefully that came across in this interview. It is a fine line, because I can be, as we've established, as the guys come to town, I can be a little over the top and a little annoying with all those questions. But yeah, for the most part, I think they enjoy talking about the position, because most of these guys love the position. And Henrik, for sure, loves the position.
It's coming up, our feature interview brought to you by Sense Arena VR. But first, the gear segment as we head over to the Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com, source for sports Surrey. Last week, we did the Vaughn SLR3 Chesty, which is interesting because you have a great story regarding the Vaughn Chesty. This week is the SLR3 pants. Before we get into the gear segment, Hutch, Woody, I want your number one thought that comes to mind when it comes to Henrik Lundqvist, whether it's a save, whether it's a win, a moment, or go on down the list. Just what pops into your head when you think about Henrik Lundqvist? Hutch.
For me, it's just the way he played the game at his size, because we hear kids told as they grow up through the position, get out of the net, get out of the net, get out of the net. And here's a guy that found a way to play the game I would say, different than just about anybody else at a size that you wouldn't think he could. I mean, look, it's okay if a guy who's 6'7" decides he's going to stand on the goal line because it lets him be more mobile and get around the crease more quickly because he's got the size to fill the net. But Lundqvist didn't. And so that state of mind, that confidence that I'm going to do it my own way. Ooh, that sounds like a bit of a New York thing, doesn't it? That's what really stood out to me. And I think it's such an important trait to have, that confidence in yourself, that belief in yourself that you can do it your way. Just love that about him.
Mine was just his passion for the position, whether it's the gear, whether it's style, the way he approached the game. He just loved being a goalie, and he put it all together. And I always admired him for he's just a pure goalie. He's not like the geek out goalie. But behind the scenes, he was just that kid that you talked about in minor hockey, Woody.
Yeah, to me, it's not just moments. Although I think honestly, like the run to the Cup final was a massive one for me. The intensity, his results in Game 7, and he talks about this, that relaxed intensity, finding that balance between being on the edge and so passionate and so intense without losing yourself in it. And so he talks about that in the interview. That's watching that in some of the biggest stages. His success in Game 7s being tied to that. The Turin Olympics, and then honestly 2014 in Sochi. Like, people forget, like, that gold medal game against Canada I think was a 1-0 game, and Henrik almost stole it for the Swedes. Those are some of the best moments, but to be honest with you, the biggest two are probably behind the scenes. First of all, getting a chance to watch him practice. I will never forget, and I've told the story before, them coming in, optional skate, on the road, me going to the rink expecting to watch Alexander Georgiev. This is late in the career. And there's 6 or 7 Rangers skating, and Lundqvist is the first one on the ice and the last one to leave it, breakaways till the end. And some of the highlight reel saves, and we've published them actually. I've put them on social media, and I've talked about this as a lesson for young goalies. And again, he talks about it today, like the intensity he brought to every practice, the intention he brought to every practice at that stage in his career, when every other guy his age with his experience is taking that optional off. He is first on, last off, and he competed on every freaking puck. It was so impressive to watch. And it made me just sort of like, it made the legend grow bigger. And the other one, as you mentioned, we've told this story before too, and I was hesitant to tell it again, but we'll tie it into the gear segment because we did the Vaughn chest protector last week and we're doing the pants this week. He was a Bauer guy, but he did wear Vaughn chesties for I think all or most of his career. May have switched late into something else. But he came into town one year, and I can't remember the year, but he was wearing an old V3, and you could see that him and Marquez Acasio, the equipment trainer who played such a big part of his career, and we'll get into that in the interview, there was an element of Frankenstein to this thing. They had added pieces here and modified things there. But he was getting beat up. Like you could see it in his arms, and like there were visible bruises as I'm talking to him, and you could tell he's kind of like, as he's taking it off, there's a little wince there. And I had just gotten the new Vaughn V6, which is the first time they'd added carbon fiber into sort of built it into some of the arm pieces and some of the protection levels. And we were testing it for a review, but it wasn't public yet. Like, it wasn't out yet, and he hadn't seen it because he wasn't a Vaughn guy. And so in our conversation, I was like, I think I might have something in my garage that would help with what you're experiencing here. Would you be interested? And, oh yeah, for sure. And so I went home in the afternoon and grabbed it and brought it back. And here I am. All the media goes down post game to the locker room, and I walk into the Rangers locker room with a chest protector. And he does his interviews, and then we go into the stick room in the back. And Cass comes in, and I had to go get Elaine Vigneault, the coach at the time, in the hallway, do my job, get my interview. And so I left the chest protector with them, and I came back in, and he's got it on, and they're going over and they're pointing at parts and talking about things. And they're like, okay, they really appreciate this. And they hand it back to me because not mine to give away. So I found out the next morning they ordered 3 of them. So just,
wow,
like that passion for the position and the willingness. He's Henrik freaking Lundqvist. The willingness to sort of check out something new and try something new based on a suggestion of like some media guy that's like, hey, like, you look like, I think there's new layers of protection in this new unit that you haven't seen that might help you. Like, to me, that just, again, we talk about the guys who are no stone unturned. Henrik Lundqvist epitomized no stone unturned. He just wanted to be the best, and he would try anything to get there.
So unanimous that all of us listening to that story are trying to imagine what that would be like, sitting in the stick room watching and conversing and going back and forth with Henrik Lundqvist over a piece of equipment and just being in his world, but it being a goalie. You're not talking to the legend, you're talking to just a guy who loves the position the same as you. How cool that would be.
Well, and to be perfectly like transparency, I wasn't a mat. Once I handed it over to those two, I was just the fly on the wall. That was them going back and forth. I wasn't having a big part of I did the introductions of the piece, and then I got out of there. So, but that's the thing. Like, as big a star as he was, like, he answered emails from us. Like, I tried not to be too annoying, but I would send emails every once in a while with a question, relating to some, whether it was a change in equipment or some big moment, and he would answer. And taking us into the stick room on a visit in Vancouver when I knew he had other things he had to do after practice, but pulling us into the stick room to show us the unique paddle grip and how he ran his fingers over it and why he felt it, gave him a good blocker position for saves, because he had that squared off top shoulder on the stick. So, just that, like, that willingness to talk about all those different elements of the position, even when, like I said, I could get a little annoying with all the questions. Yeah, he always seemed to have time for it. So I always appreciated that passion and that willingness to share that time, no matter how big a star he became.
So, Hutch, I just think you're at the hockey shop, standing there with Cam trying on chesties, and that's basically what Hank did with Cass and Woody. Like, it's the same type of setup. It's just one's a legend, and, well, I'm not saying Cam's not a legend, but it's you're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's the mobile hockey shop. The only thing is Woody wasn't walking around the Rangers room, putting on gear, throwing it down on the floor, hoping that Cam's running around behind him picking it up. Isn't it just like to. It's just the perfect image, though, because Woody, every interview, just apologizes to these guys who have retired and sorry for all the years of driving you crazy, but now you picture him just walking into the Rangers room holding a chesty. Hey, check this out.
Yeah.
It was definitely
one of the Elaine Vigneault.
More unique, one of the more unique post-game visits of my career, and probably like I don't think that happens. There aren't a lot of reporters walking in with chest protectors after a game. So
was it on a hanger, or are you just lugging it around?
I think I was just lugging it around. Maybe it was. I don't even remember. I just kind of drawn a blank. I can think it's funny because earlier in my career, for sure, I would have been like afraid to do something like that, right? Like, just it is a little odd, but it worked, and it was
for good reason, because it's a little odd.
I'm a little odd. What can I say? That's why we're goalies.
That's why we love you.
So, Chesty last week, the SLR3 pants this week as you tie them in.
Yeah, and there's a pro feature on this one too, guys. We talked about, like, the SLR3 Chesty there's a lot of changes in that one from previous models. Same goes for the pants, and the biggest one is quite visible. Double layer of protection over the hips that we'll talk to Cam about. This is a feature that used to get ordered a lot by pros, and now it's stock and available at retail on the SLR3. Let's have Cam fill us in on the rest. Welcome back to the Hockey Shop Source for Sports. We're in Goalie Utopia with Cam Matwiv. Last week we showed you the new SLR3 Pro Carbon Chest Protector. Today we've got the pants, and much like the chest protector we showed you last week, Cam, big changes for Vaughn in this model, and changes for the better.
Yes.
Walk me through the ones that jump out first before I start firing questions at you.
As much as I love your questions, so hopefully I can cover some of them here. So Vaughn has always had, there are 2, sometimes even 3 lines of pants. SLR, especially in previous versions and continuing here, has always been designed to be a bit more of the looser of the 2 fits. So a bit easier for integration with the chest, in terms of for tucking in, things along that nature. Also,
tucking, untucking, half tucking. We covered it last week when we went over the chest protector. If you haven't seen it yet, go back and check it out.
Yeah, that's something I would say. Jeez. So, still continuing on with the internal belt, which we will show. One of my favorite features that they have added, though, is the dual thigh flaps. So these bad boys is something commonly requested when ordering the pant custom, just to beef up that hip area. Overall, this will allow extra protection for those hips. but great flexibility and mobility. It's a nice pro feature that has been integrated in the pant after being requested quite a bit.
So this is something that we would have seen on a lot of NHL goaltenders, something they would have requested, but up until this point, not something that's been stock from Vaughn.
No.
And now it is.
Yeah, hey, there you go, exactly.
And now you know.
The more you know. Continuing with that kind of thigh and hip area, Vaughn's also extended the actual hip pad of the pant itself. Again, focusing on better integration with the chest and overall fit in terms of for tucking in, half tucked as well, allowing for that good integration with that chest and also coming to make sure that there's no gaps in your overall protection.
And again, we talked about it with the SLR3 Pro Carbon Chest Protector. It's a bit of a shorter unit, so having a bit of a higher fit on the hip in the pant makes a lot of sense. Keep going, Cam. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you just love interrupting.
Not really, but
your
keep going.
favorite thing to do. Interesting new feature too as well. Last year's belt, well, we shouldn't say last year, further years past. So the SLR2 pant, 2 pull belts, one singular pull belt for its actual internal belt this year. So a little bit of an easier integration in terms of being able to tighten it up so you're not having to deal with both at the same time, as well as actually popping it in front of the laces. I found this kind of an interesting feature just in terms of how it integrates and how it fits with the actual chest itself. I do find when you pull a little bit tighter, it does snug up the waist a bit more than some of the other internal belts that we do have on the wall.
I was going to say, that's the one thing. So on a CCM belt, because the inner belt is all internal, you can snug it up and it doesn't change the profile of the pant. It remains as loose as it ever was, a barrel. That would be, I actually really liked this idea of having the inner belt run through the front, but you can see as I snug it up, because it's connected, it will also, it gives you a great fit inside and a nice connection, but it will sort of
what he's trying to say is tapers in the waist. There you go.
Tapering in the waist is good if you're a fashion model.
It was on the tip of your tongue.
Not so good if you're a goaltender.
Okay, so moving down to the actual thigh barrel.
Oh, hold on. We should also mention the inner belt is removable.
Yes, it is removable, just like you from this video. Look at the thigh barrels. 11 inches wide, so non-NHL needle. However, very tapered fit and rounded. So it still kind of gives that a little bit of that NHL look for sure. To me, these do feel thicker than last year as well. I don't know the exact specs to say that, hey, this is a 1/4 inch thicker because they've added HD foam. However, to me, it feels beefed up, a little bit more protective. Again, this pant overall to me really feels like a beefed up unit versus the last year's model for sure in the SLR2. Another good call out that Vaughn has featured in their pants all the way throughout their lines has been their actual tab for laced in knee pads as well. Little other tab that you feel about midpoint up the actual thigh pad themselves. Yes, so you can actually tie your knee pads in to the pad themselves if you want to have both integrated together.
I got to be honest with you, I like the again, it's the tapering as a visual appeal thing, and yes, NHLers have rounded now mandated.
9-inch barrel.
But much smaller than this. But as a guy who, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, I don't mind a little square profile in the front to sort of make sure nothing slips through those seams.
But the nice thing is that when you actually do stand up and then seal your legs together, you still actually got a nice, pretty flat surface just with the way they've integrated those inner 5-hole blocks. It still helps to expand that out and create some great coverage for the pant overall.
Especially when if I don't have knee pads on underneath. If I were to have knee pads, that would sort of sit out like this.
Correct.
I got to say, as much as you talked about this being, a much sort of beefier unit than the last one, there is a lot of mobility in here. I love with the inner belt, as much as I talked about it cinching, it just feels like a unit that isn't going to require a whole bunch of break-in.
No, still stays true to a bit of that gym short fit that Vaughn has always been known for. So if you would like to find out more,
where can they get you?
604-589-8299 or 1-800-567-7790.
Anything else you'd like to do in this video today, Cam?
Yeah, check us out at thehockeyshop.com.
His show. I have often wondered why manufacturers don't make their chest and pants more integrated in the sense of where they're mutually exclusive and almost force you to wear, if you wear one, you wear the other one. And this combination, I don't think it's quite there, but it's getting closer. Is it not, Woody? I would say that there are elements that accentuate each other quite well. And we've had this happen in the past, right? Like we talked about the SLR3 chest protector being a bit of a shorter unit. And so the fact that the pants have higher hips, like, yeah, they kind of go hand in glove. Not to tease the Henrik Lundqvist interview too much, but hand in glove. And they fit together very well. We've seen it with other ones, right? We saw it with the eFlex 5 as a shorter chest protector, like not a long chest protector on the torso. And then those pants with the way their inner belt works. And yeah, like they're designed to work together. But there's also, because each brand sort of has a longer unit, a shorter unit, like they have variations within their different models. And these two do go together really well, but they would probably, those pants would work with an eFlex 5 chest protector. The one part that did jump out at me, the half tuck that we talked about last week in my little attempt at TikTok dancing, the half tuck with these pants really does seem to work well. And they accentuate each other because the half tuck allows the sort of, you're tuck in the middle of the belly, but the rib protection goes out. And that's the one, it's not even a weakness, but it's the one area in this pant, because the inner belt runs through the front of the pant, when you cinch it, it actually pulls the waist of the pant a little tighter. Yeah. Whereas what I love about my CCM Premier pants, I cinch that belt and get that security, but the pants themselves maintain the full width of the barrel. In other words, they present bigger, so I look bigger and might catch a few more pucks off of them. In this case, you actually do sort of cinch in the waist of the pant when you pull the belt together, but having the ability to have the rib protection untucked makes up all that space again. And if you like the connected feel between your pant and your chest, if that's something that's important to you, you sort of get the best of both worlds. So as you said, Darren, like there are elements of these two parts, the SLR3 pant and the SLR3 chest protector, that really go well together. And, just to be honest, like there's some new innovations here and some new things in terms of the protection on the pants and the features we talked about with the chest protector last week that, makes this an exciting combination. Probably the first time in a while, to be perfectly frank, that I've been excited about a Vaughn combination of pants and chest protector.
Yeah, Hutch, you jumped all over the hip.
The double hip
padding.
Yeah, for sure. The whole time my kid's been growing up, that's been an area that's driven me crazy, that I don't think there's sufficient padding there. I spent the last couple of years trying to find something that we could get access to that would give him the double hip protection. The first time I saw an NHL goaltender walk past in those Vaughn pants, I guess jealousy would be the word, for wanting to be able to get my hands on a pair of pants like that. So to see that those are now a stock retail feature for them, if I had to get some pants for my kid, I'd be running to the hockey shop to try and grab a pair of these and just see if they work for him, because I find that that's been an area that's been woefully under padded, and we're trying to absorb pucks, into the middle of our body. They're bound to hit there a fair bit. So I think it's awesome that it's now available, and I imagine other companies will be following suit fairly quickly.
On the subject of hip, is there anybody cooler than Henrik Lundqvist?
No.
I mean, he just owned it on ice, off ice, just rolling with the upper echelon of celebrities. It's just it's wild, and the suits and he had everything. And we can't wait to bring you the feature interview brought to you by Sensorina VR.
How about we forgot favorite moments. How about ripping off "Sweet Child of Mine" with Jimmy Fallon on late night on the guitar? Like, the guy can slash on the guitar. And you know what? I didn't ask him, because I did ask him once during his career, and I did not ask him about that great glove hand being, we have stories about how the neural pathways of playing the guitar actually give you a positive effect on a glove hand. But as I'm saying that, you know what I'm thinking, Hutch? I'm thinking Sensorina. I'm thinking neural pathways. I'm thinking things that you can do off the ice that make you better off the ice, training those neural pathways and those reactions. So Henrik had the guitar. I will never be that cool, and I will never be able to play the guitar, but I do have Sensorina that can help me get better.
You do, and that headset from Oculus gives you access to a whole world of VR stuff. So I can imagine Woody's probably looking for a VR guitar app so he can feel really cool like a rock star, like Henrik Lundqvist is. But it's funny you talk about Henrik Lundqvist and Sensorina, because being a little bit competitive, that you can get yourself ranked in each of the different drills, and Sensorina tells you where you fit compared to your peers. And I know it's not a game, but I am highly competitive, so I wanted to get our name up to the top of the list one time. So Maddie and I spent the better part of a day trying to crush every drill that we could. And I found in messing around there that if I tried it Lundqvist style, stood on the goal line, all those drills that required a lot of movement suddenly got a whole lot easier for me. And it was not an intentional try. I was more just trying to game the system so that I could get our names up in lights there pretty quick. And I found the Lundqvist way worked. And I'm all of 5'8" if I'm lucky on a good day wearing shoes. But it was really a cool thing to play with. And so I just love Sensorina because it gives you that opportunity to try things. If you're a minor hockey goaltender, you're a beer league goaltender, you don't get access to a whole ton of ice to practice things. If you're a beer league goaltender, you get basically none because it's all games. Sensorina lets you at home spend as much time as you want trying things and see how they affect your game. And guys, playing a little bit Henrik Lundqvist style was something that really worked out for me. And this is a great time of year to take advantage of a new opportunity with Sensorina. Not so much a new, but a new promotion that they've got going. 5 a day. They're giving away the headset and the controllers, everything you need to make it work. You just make an annual commitment to the software and they will send you a free headset. And like I said, that headset gives you access to Sensorina and a whole world of virtual reality apps. So it's an incredible opportunity to get involved. And right now, kids, even beer leaguers, are sort of making a transition in their season. Seasons are ending, playoffs are starting. We're thinking about next season, how we're going to train this summer. Sensorina is a great opportunity to get into some of their training programs, learn how to read plays, learn how to read shots. And as Woody alluded to in the beginning there, they've got all this great suite of neurocognitive drills that allow you to develop your mind, to develop your hand-eye coordination, independent of the goaltending. Just develop those pathways so that you can become a better athlete overall. Sensorina, thank you very much for sponsoring our feature interviews. And I suggest everybody gives it a try because it's an incredible tool.
And I know because it's Henrik Lundqvist that everybody is going to download and listen to this podcast as soon as it launches. And I hope they do, because the 5-a-day offer expires March 13th, folks. So we're coming to the end of it. Don't wait too long. This thing is limited time. It's been up for a week. If you haven't taken advantage of it already, make sure you check it out as soon as you hear this interview.
So many places that are traveled on this conversation between Woody and Henrik Lundqvist, including the origin of the Lundqvist loop. And send us a note. Let us know. Was it what you thought it was? Was the design of that, the invention of that, sort of down the same path as you anticipated, or was it something totally different? I'm curious. Here is Henrik Lundqvist with Kevin Woodley on InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by The Hockey Shop, source for Sports Surrey, thehockeyshop.com. The feature interview, a presentation of Sensorina VR.
So excited to welcome to the InGoal Radio podcast. I guess actually excited would probably be an understatement. I don't know that I have the words. I've had the pleasure of talking to him when the New York Rangers came through town to play the Canucks over the last 15 years of working for NHL.com and InGoal magazine. But now we get him on the InGoal Radio podcast live in person for the first time. And I don't even coming off an emotional, tear-jerking evening where your jersey is raised to the rafters. Henrik Lundqvist, what has the last couple of months and weeks been like leading up to that ceremony, going through it? And has it given you a chance to sort of look back at your career and reflect through all of that?
Well, first off, it was an incredible night in so many ways. The Rangers put together such a nice evening for me, my family, my friends. The fans were amazing. Everything leading up to the night was incredible too. I had a great week with so many people, and it was definitely a little emotional, and it just felt so special. So I was so happy with everything. Every little detail worked out perfectly. And when it comes to reflecting on my career, obviously I had quite some time now over the past, I'm going to say, year really think about my career. And even though I didn't retire until August, I've been through a lot over the last 12 to 14 months. And of course, you think about what you experienced and all the great moments you share with so many people, teammates and fans. And I'm just so grateful for everything. And I've been in a very good place mentally and happy. And even though it's been challenging at times with physically over the past 12 months, it's I've been in a good place. So just leading up to the ceremony, I just wanted to enjoy it. And I also said it on the ice that evening that I look forward to come back and just thank so many people, within the organization, the fans. And it felt so amazing for me to have that moment with everyone and to share that night. So I couldn't be happier, to be honest.
That relationship with the fans has become so special for you and obviously for the city of New York. Have you been able to sort of put your finger on why you became such a big part of that franchise and vice versa, why this city left such an impression on you?
It's a good question. I don't know. It's just, of course, if you spend 15 years anywhere and you're committed to it and you try to leave everything you got, hopefully people appreciate that. And over time, there's so much that made it great to play in New York. I love the organization. I love the city, the energy, the challenges. It's not easy to come in here and play, but it's definitely a great challenge to take on and a fun one. So I really enjoyed that. And I don't know, over time, of course, you start to, I don't know, your first year as a rookie, you're very focused on yourself. You need to make the team, first of all, and then you want to start playing games and establish yourself. It doesn't matter what you accomplished in Europe, winning a couple of championships and play for the national team. It doesn't really matter when you come here. You have to kind of start over. And so that was my number one focus coming into the league back in 2005, just to establish myself and try to be part of that. And then for every year that goes by, you feel more and more connected to the team, to the organization, to the city, and you invest even more of yourself towards that. It was just it was great to see how that developed over time. And I didn't see that coming, how much I felt for the organization. And I was just very lucky to be in one place throughout my entire career and created so many friendships and special moments.
I want to ask you how you got started in the position, how that relationship started. I know I've read that it's as simple as Joel raising your hand, your twin brother Joel, when a coach asked who wanted to be a goalie. But there must have been a reason he raised it. What did you love? Like what made you fall in love with the position at an early age, assuming you did?
Yeah, I remember in kindergarten, so probably age 5. Back then, this is late 80s. It was, we didn't have a lot of opportunities to watch hockey on TV, but the few times we did, it was national team playing. And one of the best goalies at the time was Peter Lindmark, playing for Team Sweden. And I don't know, it was something about the pads maybe. And I was a goalie in soccer. So there was something about being that last resource and responsibility. But I think also that the equipment was something that fascinated me. Even though back then they were brown and heavy, and it's not what they're looking today, that's for sure. But it was still something about it that intrigued me. And I remember first practice. I loved it. And growing up, we didn't have a ton of money, so I made my own pads, pillows, and belts, and I love to design them in different ways and colors. And the first set of pads I got, I think I was 10 or something, but they were way too big, so I couldn't really use them. And then, yeah, I had to be creative growing up with for street hockey. You know, we spent so many hours on the street, me and my brother. That was a huge part of our childhood.
Oh, well, there's a lot of tie-ins there between building your own gear then and all the ways you used to innovate the gear later in your career that I want to ask you about. But I wanted to stick in Sweden for a little bit. Moving up the ranks when you were younger and starting to move into, you know, some of the competitive teams and into the national team focus, you know, there's ups and downs for every goalie at a young age. When did you, as you developed over there before coming over here and meeting Benny, how did, you know, who are your first influences from a coaching standpoint? We see now, I mean, kids, you talked about being a goalie at 10, like getting your pads at 10. We'll see kids with goalie coaches by 7 or 8. When did you have your first goalie coach? What was the development system like over there at the time? And how'd you fit into it and start to grow your game?
Yeah, so back then it was very different in Sweden. Not a lot of teams had goalie coaches.
Right.
You kind of watched and learned as you practice. You saw the goalies, and I had a few goalie coaches that, you know, that I saw maybe a couple times a year. Went to a camp or something, and they had a goalie coach. But on a consistent basis, I didn't really work with a goalie coach until I was, I'm going to say 19. Before that, you know, I had a few guys here and there, you know, talking to me, but for the most part, and I remember a lot of them told me, you know, you're way too much on the ice. You need to stand up, because back then they taught us how to make saves with your skates, right? Those old school skate saves instead of using the pad. That's what I remember back in the day. And I loved to be down and butterfly. I remember watching a lot Dominik Hasek and Patrick Roy. Those were my first big idols, other than Peter Lindmark, who was the first guy, you know, when I started. But when I started watching the NHL back in, I'm going to say early 90s, you know, Patrick Roy, Dominik Hasek was definitely the two guys that I watched. And, you know, I remember watching Dominik Hasek first time I saw him go paddle down. I didn't see that before. So I saw it on a highlight on TV. It's like, wow, that's different. And then I remember the next day in practice, I tried it. It's like, yeah, this makes sense. Paddle down from post and in, and, you know, stuff like that. You try to pick up what you saw the big guys were doing, and then you tried it. And that, yeah.
I think that's almost become a bit of a lost art, right? In an era where everything is coached a certain way at a certain age. I mean, I got to think that there's an element of learning on your own and developing your own game and learning to read the game and sort of surviving on your own that probably pays off as you move into your career. No, just in terms of developing skills and learning to sort of read and anticipate things around you.
I think so. And I think it's important to realize your strength and who you are as a goalie and what type of style you want to play, because you can play different styles, right? You just need to figure out what works for you, so you don't try to do too many things that a goalie coach are telling you. I always tell guys that I run my goalie school back in Sweden. I've been doing it for 16, 17 years now, and you know, different coaches say different things, and you should always be open to learn and have an open mindset, because the game is always changing. It's changed so much over the last 20 years, and it's going to continue to change. So always keep an open mind to development and your own game. But in the end, you got to figure out what works best for you. And, you know, you can see things happening. You watch the NHL or you watch your local goalie, you know, and he's doing something, try it. But it's not, you can't force things. Sometimes I feel like goalies, they don't play to their strength. They play the technique so much. And I think that's a balance where you need to figure out how much do I use the technique and how much should I just, you know, play the actual game. And I remember Benny always telling me that too when I was playing. Don't play the technique, play the game. And I think that's a fine line for any goalie these days, because they're so good technically.
Well, that's a perfect segue into coming over here. I wanted to ask you about that last year with Frölunda, and how that set you up for success coming to the NHL as a rookie for the first time the next year? I mean, with so many NHL players overseas and in the Swedish league because of the lockout, to have this season you did that just sort of provide a foundation, at least from a confidence standpoint, when you finally made the decision to come over to North America?
Yeah, that year was huge for me. No question about it. I remember I was going to go 04, 05, but then because there were talks about a lockout, I waited, and then I decided, no, I don't want to, go over to North America and there's no season. So I stayed in Sweden one more year. And like you said, we probably had 10, 11 NHL goalies in the league. So I had a great opportunity to measure myself against these guys. And I had, at that point, probably my best season of my career. And we won the championship. And it was just mentally knowing that I could compete against, at the time, the best NHL goalies, Kiprasov and Theodore. And there was a bunch of guys there that I knew I could compete against these guys. So making the move that summer and coming to training camp, mentally, I knew I could do it. The big question for me was, can I adapt to the new style? It's quicker and a little more physical, and shooters are obviously better. But it definitely helped to have that year preparing and knowing that, I can compete against these guys.
Well, one of the other things you had to adapt to was a new voice in Benoit Lair, who you've already mentioned. I'll never forget the quote that Benny gave me, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, but it was a couple of years into your career and just chatting as you guys were coming through town once. And he talked about, he knew right away that you were going to be great. And he compared you to Tiger Woods' ability to change his swing. And he said it was your ability to adapt to anything so fast that in his mind, that's what made greatness. And he saw that in you right away. What was that process like, especially when, the adaptation you were being asked to make that first year was pretty significant? Playing in Sweden, probably a little more outside in, and now all of a sudden, more deep, playing deeper, inside out mentality. Like, that's not an easy switch to flip, and you seem to do it so effortlessly.
Well, it comes down to two things, I think. Trust and then result. Like, I listened to Benny and I trusted him from his experience. And it was not only playing deep, it's my entire stance changed. Right. I was very low and aggressive coming from Sweden. And when I started playing deep here, we worked a lot on being more upright and it made me way more patient. And it was easier to read the game and I was just more relaxed when I was playing. The more I crunched down, the more I competed sometimes, less patient I got. So there were so many good things that started to happen when I was more upright and more patient. And everything started falling into place. But it started with just trusting Benny, and we worked on it. And I remember the first camp, the big thing is how quickly, after a shot, the second play, they're right there. They're always close to the net. So being too aggressive, it was just hard to be in the right place for the second and third play. So that's something we worked on, and I could feel, pretty fast that it was helping me. And I think over time too, I changed even more, with the stance and how I was playing. But that first year was definitely a time of adapting to so many things.
And was it hard? I mean, you're facing NHL shooters, I guess not for the first time, because like you said, over in the lockout, there was a lot of them in Sweden, and you've been playing against elite shooters over there. But here we are coming to, face the best in the world, and now you want me to play further back? Like, there's got to be. I remember having this conversation with Marc-Andre Fleury when they kind of finally reined in his game and practice with Sid and Gino and the Penguins greats, and he's like, that was the hardest part of becoming more conservative with my positioning, was trusting it when they had all these great players in practice that could, what practice is like, time and space and pick corners, right? It's tough.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key, not to. You're gonna give up a few goals because you stay deep. and not to overreact to that, or because in the end, I'm going to save so many more because I'm in the right position for so many other plays and I have more time to read and react. But yeah, if you can always say, I should have been more aggressive here, and then you start to be a little inconsistent. Sometimes you challenge, sometimes you stay deep. And I felt like for the most part, I was able to, stay pretty, what did I say? No, I was convinced that it was working, even though there was definitely goals where I knew I would have stopped it if I challenged more. But I tried to be consistent with my game plan, and Benny was very good about it, helping me stay consistent with the game plan. But to your other point, like coming here, the biggest difference is the top players. There's a lot of players here. You see the same skill overseas, but it's the top of the top. That's where. And every team has a couple of those guys that sticks out that you think you can stop, or you think it's under control, but it's just so much harder because they're at another level.
You mentioned evolving and like the stance getting narrower and more upright. You added some depth on breakaways, like you started to take ice and flow on those. As you change, because you have to as a goalie, right? The game is constantly changing around us. I think that's what I love about the position. There's no one way, right? But was there a staple? Like, was there an anchor that maybe if things weren't going well, or if you were looking at your game from the outside, was there one staple that allowed you to sort of anchor yourself and sort of became your foundation, or one or two things? Or did that change over time too?
Well, I noticed, we touched it earlier, just my stance. When I was more upright, I was more relaxed. I was reading the game. So sometimes when, if you had a bad game, you start to compete too much. And so sometimes it was more about just taking a deep breath and take a step back and like relax and trust your ability. And for me, after bad games, my thing was the next day I worked the hardest I could. And that way build my confidence going into the next game. Because a lot of times I had, not great energy coming in the next day after a tough loss, and I felt like I could have done better. I try to use that energy and disappointment in that practice and just to build confidence. And a lot of times I ended practice with breakaways just to, get that compete level, quickness in my feet. So I would leave the ice with a good feeling for the next game.
You've already touched on it a little bit, but I want the phrase you used with me once was relaxed intensity. You're such a competitor and so fiery, and you hated to lose. And yet, as you said, if you got too worked up in the crease, it's hard to be patient. It's hard to relax. Is there any advice you could give to young goalies that are struggling to find that balance? Because I think I had a goalie coach say it to me recently, tension is the enemy of goaltending. If we get too dug in, too tensed up in that intensity, we can lose the ability to sort of take that breath and be patient and be relaxed. How did you find that balance? Is there any advice you can share with other young goalies listening right now?
Well, I think that is the biggest challenge for any goalie, to find that perfect balance mentally where you're on edge but still relaxed. And I don't think it gets any easier. I mean, being 23 or 35, or you have more experience, but everything is changing constantly, the expectations and the pressure and how much pressure you put on yourself. So what I felt, though, I always wanted to be on my toes when I played. So I couldn't be too relaxed. Then I was more flat-footed. I had to be on my toes, but at the same time, breathing is good, just to get the pulse down. But I needed that intensity. That was kind of part of my game, but everybody's different. I have played with a lot of goalies. They talk before the game. That's their way of, getting in the right mindset, because otherwise they're too tense. I was very quiet and I did my thing going into game. And I think that's also part of figuring out who you are. You have the style or the technique part, but then the mental aspect of it, you just need to figure out how you work and when you're at your best. How tense should I be? Like when you play your best, that's when you should reflect on that. As much as you get feedback from bad games, because I feel like you get a lot of good information when you play bad. It's like, okay, I need to do this better. When you play great, you just feel good. But just take a step back. Like, why am I feeling good? How intense was that? How did I prepare? And you learn from that as well. But I definitely feel like I learn more from bad games than from good games.
Did you mark any of these things down throughout your career? We've talked to guys over the years that use journals or to sort of, like you said, it's one thing to sort of take that step back and assess it, but sometimes some guys need to jot it down. Some guys need to see it in writing. They sort of build that archive. Is that something you did?
I had a few things that I kept reminding myself. And I didn't want to complicate it, but a few words that, it was about my stance. It was my focus, like 3-4 things that I looked at once in a while, and just a reminder, because I knew it's been helping me so many times. So I try to be consistent with that. Those are the things I want to be focusing on, and not the result or what I had to do. It was more just, okay, these things will help my game. Let's focus on that, and it will lead to good results.
Any chance you can share those words, or you save that one for the book?
I'll try to remember. It's been a couple of years now. High, deep, compete.
High would be the stance.
Deep, play deep.
Yeah.
And then compete.
I love it.
3 words were kind of key words for me when I played.
Well, and everybody has reminders, right? Some guys, like I said, they'll journal them. We've seen guys write them down in their blocker, just as a reminder, have in the cuff of their blocker every once in a while. Whatever grounds us, right? And you've talked about patience.
Yeah, exactly.
You've talked about patience. Was that stance key to you? Like, again, not getting locked in too low and wide? Because I think when we look at your game and the way you played, most of the guys that play at that depth are like 6'4", 6'5", and yet you never played small despite not being 6'4", 6'5". And I looked at it and it felt like it was so much about patience. Were there, other than stance, how'd you develop it? And again, there's all these kids out there that are making notes as they listen to this. How do I play like Henrik Lundqvist? How did he stay so patient? Any tips? Inside edge high? Like that, is that one of them?
Yeah, I would say, and also, I have to practice. We did a lot of half circle, shooting, and I noticed when I stayed almost on the goal line, I found it almost easier to stop the shots. I had so much time to read the shot and react. If I was top of the crease, it felt a lot of times I got handcuffed on shots, between the glove and your shoulder. It was hard to react to that. And also, when I was deeper, a lot of times they tried to beat me on the outside instead of through me, or because there was more room on outside, if that makes any sense. But I remember a lot of times I was just standing very deep, and that extra, feet or sometimes 2 feet of distance makes a big difference in reaction time, and both how to read the shot, but also before the puck even hits you. So just to feel that difference too in practice is good to know that, okay, I don't have to challenge, because if I stay this deep, it's actually, I found it a lot easier to make the save. And the biggest thing is also playing the percentage. What if there's a rebound? How good will I be in the play 2 or 3 here? I'll be right in front of the puck. Because when I played deep, the puck was almost always in front of me instead of to the side, or it was less scramble for me to get to that second play. But also thinking about my style, like I grew up, I was kind of in between of the old style and new style, and now guys are so good technically. So they, the things I saw in the end of my career, a lot of things I couldn't do that. It was just I was not built for that, or I just haven't spent enough time doing it. It would take too much time to change. So, from bad angle or come around the post, it was a lot of one knee down. I never, unless it was a quick wrap around, I didn't go reverse BH or, I wanted to stand up and waited for the shot. And as soon as they shot it, I went one leg down and then I felt like I had a better push across if they were going across instead of being down. So so early. But yeah, part of that was just because I couldn't do it as good as the other guys.
Well, I've got 20 years in, I've seen it from the beginning. I remember starting in 03, 04 and covering the NHL, and you go to camps with 12-year-olds, and proper leg recovery is one of the first things they learned. And yet half the National Hockey League at that time, they got up off their strong leg, not the proper leg every time. So it is a constant evolution. One of the things that I was curious about, because you talk about being in position to get to second and third chances, and yet you had so much speed in the crease. At least it sure looked like it, Henrik. There was a video when you were back in Sweden recently where you were showing some T-pushes and skating drills, and you look like you still had it, just flying around there from spot to spot. Where does it? And I know Valley's talked about how much power you generate for a guy who's, like, you don't have running back NFL legs, right? And yet you have so much power and speed in there. I know you did tennis in the off season, or any other, like, how'd you develop that? Is the skating just all about doing the movements and doing the crease movements that a lot of young goalies find boring? And is there any tips in terms of off ice training? Was tennis a good one for you? Do you think it helped fuel that element of your game?
Yeah, I think I was definitely not a strong guy when it comes to leg strength, but I felt like it was a combination, I think, of the angle of the skate and technique, maybe. But also, I had short movements. It's a lot harder to have that strong push if it's an extra feet and a half, or 2 feet.
Right.
That's why if you play on top of the crease to go across, you need a lot of power to come across. I didn't have that. Like I was deep, so then when there's short movements, it was a lot easier for me to have that strong push because it was a lot shorter. And then maybe, I don't know, when it comes to training, yeah, I did play tennis, but comparing myself to other goalies, it was not that I was super strong or anything. I worked hard. I did that.
Yeah.
But I can't say I was more explosive than anybody else. I think it was more the distance of moving short.
It looks fast.
And being able to, yeah, maybe it looks faster than it is. But, it was key for me. Everything in my game started with my feet. If I didn't, have good feet movement, everything fell apart, with everything from reacting on shots with my gloves. And so it was important for me to, the skates were sharpened the way I needed them to be. And Cass in New York, he was so good. As soon as we found the right angle and I didn't sharpen them for the longest time. Sometimes they were perfect.
Sorry, I have Cass. He was the next on my list. So obviously I'm segueing this naturally because it's leading you into the answers. I wanted to ask about that relationship and how important it was to you. Like did Inside Hedge High, was that something that you developed? Did you use that in Sweden, having your skates like that? And then the Lundqvist loop. I mean, you live on forever in the world of goalie equipment. Every manufacturer now has a Lundqvist loop. How important was it to have a guy like Cass? I remember you guys coming into town and you were playing with the little cutouts at the top edge of your knee stacks and doing butterflies in the locker room after a practice, and he's watching and you guys are talking. Like, it just seemed like you guys were constantly looking to make sure that your gear was perfect for your game.
Yeah, I think, of course, as a goalie, it helps to have a trainer like Cass. He used to run his own shop, and then he started working for the Rangers way before I got there. But he's so good at coming up with different solutions, and a lot of that you're discussing, it happened when I was on the bench. If I didn't play a game, I was always sitting and watching my gear, and like, I wonder if we tried this. I wonder how that would feel. And so a lot of times you come in the next day after, if I was sitting on the bench, Cass kind of knew, okay, what's going on now? What do you want to talk about? And but that started for me already in Sweden. I remember with the pads and developing. Back then I played with TPS, and they had this flat pad that came out. I don't remember the exact model, but then I've worked on putting like a tube along the leg to make it softer, but still keep the pad thin.
Yeah.
And then they developed that over time. And there's been so many things. We switched the buckles to plastic to save some weight. And yeah, over time, there's been a lot of things that we worked on that. It's funny when you start looking at old gear from my, first couple of years in New York. They're still at the training center, some of it, and it's like, wow, it really changed over time. And there's so many things that Bauer and all these other brands now that they're so good at developing equipment, and it makes sense. All these changes, I think for the longest time it kind of looked the same, but then things started to happen. I think they put a lot more resources into making it better for the gear to make more sense for what we were doing.
Well, do you remember the process of the loop? Because I went through like 3 years of photos from Getty Images, and for the longest time, that bootstrap, I know why you took it off. You've told us that before, why you stopped tucking it underneath the bottom of your skate. But for the longest time, it just hung loose. And then all of a sudden, I think it was actually on a West Coast road trip, it looked like, maybe from Vancouver to Calgary. All of a sudden in Calgary, there's this loop on the back of your skate. Do you remember that, going through that process?
Yeah, I do. So the reason why I didn't want to take the strap under the skate was just it made it a lot harder for me to be on my toes, because it kind of pulled me back. I want that, especially on a breakaway situation or something. If I want to lean forward a lot and be on my toes, that restricted me from doing that. So that's why I started to hold that strap behind my skate or behind my leg. But sometimes when I moved, that strap would get stuck in the skate, or it just moved around too much. So we talked to Cass, and it was like, what can we do here? So we went over a couple of times, and then we made that loop. That's how it happened over time. And then I felt way better because it was always in one place. It didn't move around as much.
And now, like I said, now like there's all kinds of different variations, Henrik. Like one company has a metal one. It's fascinating to watch it. But like I said, forever and ever, there will be a Lundqvist loop in hockey. Bauer, the innovation, was that just a perfect partnership? You talked about taking your gear apart and playing with it as far back as 10 years old. The relationship with Cass, a company that was looking to do things differently and innovate. What'd you think when you first saw the Odin pad for the first time? Like, there were a lot of people that had question marks, and yet you became a pioneer for a style of equipment that now other brands are trying to copy in terms of active rebounds and faster sliding and all those attributes.
Yeah, well, I have to say I was impressed with Bauer, when I signed with them, and the resources and the attention they had to details. And I was one of their main guys there for a while. So there was a lot of discussion, every summer about the gear, and it was fun to be part of that process. And I remember trying that new pad over in Sweden one summer, and I was blown away how light it was. And at first it was weird, it felt like you didn't have any pads on. And then, you could decide how stiff you wanted, and for rebounds, and also for the flex, and different parts of the pad. And I think the big thing for me was the balance, to figure out that when you're down in the butterfly, that was a big thing when the first set came out, to make it a little stiffer on the inside with the knee, how the knee connects to the actual pad to give the pad a more stable feel.
Yeah. And now they've
I enjoy
innovated
that
there. Yeah, right. With the knee stack's actually fixed to the pad, like it's solid now. They just kept innovating.
Exactly.
You liked being a part of that process. I got to ask you, a last one on gear is, and this one I never did get to ask you in your career. You were so good with us over the years when I'd annoy you in Vancouver with questions about your unique stick handle and all those things, but I never asked about the glove under the glove.
Oh, yeah.
How come you wore the gloves under the glove? I got like 10 people that wanted me to make sure I asked this question when we talked to you today.
So the first time I saw someone wear gloves underneath was one of my other idols, Håkan Algotsson. So he was the starter for Frölunda back in late 90s, early 2000s. So I looked up to him, and I was still a kid playing, and I saw him wear gloves. And when I moved to Gothenburg to play with Frölunda junior team at first, and then the pro team a couple of years later, I tried that, and I like my glove to sit on tight and don't move.
Right.
So what I did with those gloves, it just gave me better grip. And after a while, I also start to spray those gloves with like a gluey spray, so it got a little sticky in there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just liked it for the grip.
Okay.
And after a few years here in New York, we actually found gloves with a little more grip on the glove as well. So it developed over time as well.
Was it a really thin, like almost like a latex glove, or was it like a fabric and you could reuse it a whole bunch of times, or was it like one and done?
No, it's fabric. So they went in the laundry. I had like 3-4 sets for each game, switched after each period.
To keep that dry, tacky feeling?
And and also that was nice. You know, even if the glove was a little wet or something, to put on a nice dry glove and put my hand in there with a little glue spray, it felt like it was tight on my hand. But yeah, it was funny. Those guys, a bunch of guys, they had fun with it. It looked kind of like Mickey Mouse gloves, you know. I wore white ones for the longest time, and then we found a black model with more grip on it that we switched to. But yeah, it was just for grip.
Did you have it in the blocker too?
Yeah.
Okay, worn on both sides. I didn't realize that. The other one was that everyone asked me to ask about the practice glove, which I think we've told that story, but trying the way that glove presented, was that something you tinkered with maybe not your whole career, but a large portion of it? Like having that one that presented wide open and then one later on that would close a little bit more. And it felt like you never missed with that big wide open one. Like it was always right in the pocket. That's a skill.
Yeah, I don't know when I realized that was the type of glove I wanted, but I definitely didn't feel comfortable with a glove that closed completely, and I had to focus on opening it.
Right. This
glove was always open, so it was more just get it in the way, and then over time I started to use a little softer glove. There was a couple of years where it was so stiff I couldn't close it at all, but then I started to change that a little bit. But the downside of that was it was hard to handle the puck. That was one of the reasons why I was not a good stick handler. It was just hard to grip the stick with a stiff glove.
Oh, you'd be playing shuffleboard out there for sure because you wouldn't be able, yeah, absolutely, for sure. Hey, last one. How are you enjoying the transition? I know Valley keeps it fun for you guys in there in the studio. Now that you're on the other side and you're looking at the game, looks easy for us in the media, right? It's real simple when you're up there watching from above. How are you enjoying it? Do you see the game differently? Are you analyzing goaltending any differently, looking at it from this perspective? You seem to be enjoying it.
Yeah, I have to say, life's been very good. You know, I came back here in late August, and I knew right away I wanted to get going and do things and get back on my toes a little bit. I lived almost 12, at least 10 months on my heels a little bit, waiting for doctors to give me green light. And I just wanted to, start doing things. So TV was definitely one thing, work with fun people, great energy with Valley and John. And there's some other opportunities as well. And I have, 4 or 5 different projects I'm working on and having fun. To me, it's about just enjoying my time now, and I do fun things and be surrounded with great people with good energy. And it's been great. I miss the game for sure. I think I'll always miss the game, but there's so many fun things happening and things I look forward to now that it's been a great transition. And I think the biggest thing is the schedule, just to be able to, go away and do things, travel and pick my spots where I want to do things. And for the longest time, as long as I remember, it's always been from August till May, June. It's hockey and that schedule. That's it. There's nothing else. You do things in between here and there, but now I can really be my own boss when it comes to my schedule, and it's pretty sweet. And
you get to, at least when you're on the MSG broadcast, a franchise that you've become synonymous with and clearly have a passion for. So you get to sort of stay around that group a little bit. I got to ask, because from a distance, it's been incredible to watch. We've just become, I think, and maybe this is Benny. Maybe this is because Benny's there. We've just, every time you watch the Rangers for the last, now 17 years, it feels like you just expect to see excellence in goaltending from yourself for 15 years and now Igor. What do you see when you watch him?
I mean, he's been so impressive to watch. I think his consistency has been unbelievable. His technique is very good. He's very relaxed. There's definitely parts of his game that reminds myself a little bit, with the high stance and he's reading shots really well. Patient, and I think a lot of it comes from his stance, that he doesn't go too low, and that helps him just wait for every shot and read situations really well. But then his technique is, in my mind, so much better than my technique, and he's more the new generation. And he's been unbelievable this year. Really plays a huge part in the Rangers' success this season. I mean, the numbers doesn't lie. So, and he's just a calm guy. He's so calm, and I think the team feeds off of that. He makes big saves at the right time.
When he skates on his knees, it's like he skates on his knees better than most people skate on their skates. It's remarkable to watch. I got to ask though.
Yeah.
I know you're biased. Can goalies win the Hart Trophy though? Should goalies be able to win the Hart Trophy?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, there we go.
Why not? I mean, it's you have the goalie award, obviously, but then if a goalie means
part of the
that
team.
much to a team, I think so.
All right. And then last one on this note, we also need to get goalie coaches in the Hall of Fame. Unbelievably, there's never been one. I've been pushing for Benny's brother Frankie to be the first, but I think we should start whispering in people's ear about Benny being on that list as well, eh?
Yeah, I feel like both of them have had such an impact on goaltending. If you look at the development in that role for the last 20 to 30 years, they've had such a big part of that. It's incredible, and remember, not only with the top goalies they work with, but that has such a big effect on the rest, because they're looking at these guys. And remember, watching Patrick Raw or Sean Burke, these guys, Patrick or Roberto Longo, and they've done an incredible job with so many players. So they should get in. I agree with you. Let's start talking about it. It's time.
Well, I'm going to keep my push. I'm going to maybe ask you every once in a while to help us make a push, because I agree, it is time. That's the next stop for you too, Henrik. I can't wait to follow along as your remarkable career continues to be celebrated. Thank you for taking so much time today. I'm sorry I took so much of it, but thank you for over the years, whether it was an email in the early years or just that annoying guy in Vancouver every time you came through town with all the questions. Your patience on your skates and your patience with us has always been sincerely appreciated. And I know our audience is going to love geeking out on goalie when they listen to this. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. And it was always a pleasure talking to you out in Vancouver. I enjoyed our talks, the equipment or the game. And so thank you for that.
I listened to it twice. I could have listened to it all day, but sleep made me turn my attention towards getting up and getting ready for this podcast. Oh, well done. It was just an easy listening conversation. At first, I was like gushing over, like he's talking to Henrik Lundqvist, and after a while, it was just two guys talking gear. Well done, Woody.
Thanks. And thanks to Henrik for making the time. As busy as that guy is, like so much going on, and happy to see him finding things in retirement that are making him happy, and a schedule that allows him to balance it with family. We talked a little bit about that off the air. You just much like when we're talking about big moments, right? Like one of them for me was the run to the 2014 Cup final. As a journalist, you don't cheer for teams, you cheer for good people and good stories. And I so badly wanted it. Just like Luongo in 2011, not about being here in Vancouver, being a Canucks guy. You just wanted Luongo to get his cup. I wanted Henrik to get his. And so it's kind of sad. All these guys that I've kind of grown up admiring in this role are now retiring. So I got to find a bunch of new guys to sort of cheer on in that role.
I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. Most journalists don't cheer for stories and people. Most journalists in the Stanley Cup playoffs cheer for a sweep. That's just the plain old reality of it.
You know what? I've only covered 3 runs all the way to the Cup final. Obviously one with the Canucks and then a couple other ones where I was working for other outlets in other cities, and it's exhausting. So actually, you're right. By the time you get to the Cup final as a reporter, you just want it to be over.
Especially when you get to that 2-day break in between games 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, and just like, oh my goodness. Anyway, woe is me. I'll move on. I'll stop whining and complaining about that. But that Lundqvist loop, Hutch, I must admit, I was totally wrong with what I anticipated the genesis of it being and what the actual background and backstory is of it. Were you anywhere close?
Well, no, I don't think either one of us were wrong, because the only reason we thought what we thought is because we read what Woody wrote. Sounds like
it's my fault.
Twister. So really, Woody's the one who was wrong, and you and I were just along for the ride, as we so.
You were just misled. You were just misled.
Right.
Right. I mean, when I've reported on in the past, I was caught off guard a little too by the answer, because I had industry people that were, I think, part of the process at some level, on the Bauer side of things, and with the skates, talk about, and guys, and actually teammates and stuff talk about, the pads sitting higher and not being pulled down. But I always thought it was so they would slide up and close the 5-hole when he dropped, as pads got shorter by league rule changes. And as he said there, it was more about feeling on his toes. Some great lessons in that interview. As much as we're geeking out on gear and stuff, some really great lessons on patience and the importance of stance and feeling that. And
being on the goal line and being firm in his belief and comfortability of being on that goal line. It's wow, that's impressive. I also like the glove under the glove, and when he dropped Mickey Mouse gloves, that made me laugh. So there's
glue. I didn't know 5 or 6 different glue.
Oh, the sticky,
old school football style.
I had no idea that he did that all these years and all this. Like, I'd seen the gloves and I'd meant to ask about it through his whole career. But as you know, like we said, we asked about the stick one visit. We're always asking, you can't ask every question every time he came to town or he'd never get to leave. I'm like as a prisoner in the locker room in Rogers Arena as I go through my laundry list of questions. I finally got to ask it. I had no idea he put glue in there, that little stickum. That's awesome.
Imagine that. Just a word of warning for people. If you're going to go down that path, make sure that is in a sealed bag, that can of Stickum spray. Because if that ever, on the bus and it gets banged up against something or in the trunk and it starts spraying around on all your gear, just if you're going to go down the path, put that in some kind of sealed bag. When you put it away.
Don't forget what he mentioned was that later on they found gloves that were a little bit sticky, and you can go into just about any sporting good place these days, including the hockey shop, I think, and find gloves now that have that sort of very tacky, rubbery piece built into them, because I think football outlawed Stickum, and so all the materials guys did was invent something new that did the same thing without being sprayed onto your gloves. So much cleaner, much better way to do it.
And the hockey shop with the lizard skin's got a little texture and a little sort of that's like a little grippy feel to it as well. So
yeah,
because I'm not sure hockey parents want us to encourage kids to spray glue inside their gloves.
No, because if it doesn't work well. Oof. One of my favorite things though with kids trying stuff, I've probably told this on here before, I'm not sure, but was going to a goalie school when we were in the early days of InGoal and seeing a kid skate on with a Lundqvist loop on his skates before they were commercially available. I said, what are you doing there? Oh, I just sewed it on there. Where'd you learn about it? InGoal magazine. So it was sort of a cool Henrik Lundqvist, but I got to admit it was a little bit of an ego boost to hear that there's kids out there actually reading and learning from us.
I did it first with just lace. I had made a little loop on the back of my skate and created my own Lundqvist loop at the very start. It worked just as well. But I was nowhere close to being on point with the background and the inspiration for the Lundqvist loop.
But think about that. Like, it's kind of like, it's a funny little story in our goalie world, right? But like, That's forever. Like, yeah, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and that's forever too. And he's going to be the greatest Ranger goal. Like, that's forever too. But like, he changed. I was going to say the face, but the heel. He changed goaltending equipment. Like, and like, how many guys don't even wear a bootstrap now? And yeah, he kept the bootstrap, but like, I don't know that guys go to the next step of taking the bootstrap off completely if he doesn't make that first change. Like, every manufacturer has a Lundqvist loop, right? Like, he sort of, he was the innovator. And if you think about when that started, like that was that was a long time ago. So it's just, I don't know. I just find those parts of his story, the role he played in Bauer's talked to us about this. The original Odin concept car experiment idea was to find a foam that killed rebounds. And when they didn't, and the rebounds were active instead, Henrik was the guy in the testing stages that said, "This is awesome. Keep going this way." So I just love that he was that in tune with things, that he had that big an impact on the game with the way he changed things.
Awesome stuff. Okay, some housekeeping. What's going on over at the website? Hutch.
Lots as always. Put out our most recent email newsletter yesterday that sort of summed up the last week, and a couple things that are really worth seeing. Of course, the wrap up of the Ian Clark, Thatcher Demko hand in support drill progression. There's 3 more videos with Thatcher Demko, including one with Ian Clark sort of voicing over and talking us through the key points of the drill. That's been an incredible series that Woody put together. 3 of them there that you can follow along and, learn how to add an element of sort of calculation to your desperation, I guess you could put it. Putting some technique into a desperate situation to give yourself a better opportunity to make the save instead of just going all full road hockey. Great series that Woody put together. Great opportunity for members to learn. A few other things. Pete Fry, as always, has come to us with a mindset article this week, and Pete has a great program, the Goalie Mindset Power Program, that you can see a link to on all our articles with him. Even if you're not a member, that link is available. You can learn how to work with Pete, as so many goaltenders right up to the pro ranks do. I love this one because it's talking about something that's really common for all of us, that we sort of acknowledge you need to know how to respond to situations, whether it's in game or in career. And we just talk about being calm and neutral and so on. But Pete's such a positive, strong guy. Keep your power is the title of the article. And you have power. Can you maintain that power in your attitude, in your response to difficult situations? And just love that one and encourage people to check out all of Pete's stuff. And Ryan Miller, one of the best pro reads guys we've ever had, a guy who looks at the game in a different way, something I always appreciate. Looks at a situation and realizes he's got an opportunity to cheat a little bit, I guess you would say, lean one way a little bit, and it allows him to make a rather difficult save on a 2-on-1 as a result. And he talks through some of those cues, how he sees what's happening and why he does what he does, and well worth taking a look at. And a lot of great stuff over there. Obviously, we're now sitting at about 550 pieces of unique content for InGoal members, about 115 pro reads. So many great things you can check out over at InGoal if you become an annual member, which we would encourage everybody to do.
And we didn't get into the stick. We talked about it, but we didn't get into it with Henrik in terms of that unique squared off top of his stick. But of course, that article exists at ingoalmag.com. If you're an annual subscriber, you can just search it, use the search bar up in the top, Henrik Lundqvist stick, and you will come up with an article that ties to how you can create your own Henrik Lundqvist paddle and how that helps with blocker and hand position. An article that we started with Henrik and then had some input from a local coach, Sean Murray. So as Hutch said, the archives are deep. There are tons of stories there. If you're not a subscriber yet, check it out. That annual subscription will get you access to the full archives. I'm pretty sure we could keep you reading every day, all day for several months and not run out of something new to learn.
I'm going to hop over and read that article because I'm really curious to see how it does change the hand position with the blocker and how it helps, or what he wanted to accomplish with that. But I just got distracted there for a second because I wanted to make sure that my recorder was red, which means it's recording. And we've done what we set out to do today. A backstory and the tie-in from last week's episode. If the guy sounded a little hollower than usual, It's just they got so excited, Woody and Hutch, by being in the same room as we recorded last week's InGoal Radio, the podcast, that when we were done recording an hour plus worth of content, they forgot to hit record. So what you heard was the computer audio, not the actual mic audio.
We do this together on Zoom, as so many people have learned to do in the pandemic, and Zoom records everything for us. But we tend to keep something a little higher quality around our own offices. But because Woody and I were hanging out together quite unexpectedly last week, we got out of routine, and that routine is so important to make sure that you don't make any mistakes. And we made a mistake, and we did not hit that big glaring red button.
I think Hutch just got excited because I talked about doing the next episode in the hot tub, and I threw him for a total loop.
Mortified more than excited, Woody.
You guys realize if you would have done it in the hot tub, you would have been all over it because you would have been checking the levels and making sure water wasn't getting on the recorder or anything. But instead, you were too comfortable. So I think it should be out in the elements from now on when you guys are together.
Perish the thought.
The sad part is we are 2 for 2 now, not hitting record when we do something, the two of us in person. There is an interview with an NHL goalie coach that was fantastic, that will never see the light of day because it was not recorded and we ran out of time to start again. So you'd think, like once bitten, twice shy, but evidently neither one of us are bright enough to figure it out. So the rule now is we just can't be together when we record.
I'll give you credit. Big game today. You guys hit record. You came up large. You stepped up when it mattered. So congratulations on that. And put that one on the mantle, that interview with Henrik Lundqvist. Very cool. Congratulations on that, Woody. Hope everybody enjoyed it. And we can't wait to talk to you next week to see what's in store in the wide world of goaltending on InGoal Radio, the podcast presented by Source for Sports Surrey, The Hockey Shop, thehockeyshop.com.